Hello and welcome to another pattern recognition video. And if you're not familiar with pattern recognition, for any new viewers out there, well, basically you want to solve a set of puzzles. Today I'm going to do 10 of those. And the idea is to go through the puzzles nice and slow the first time, but then instead of solving them once and forgetting about them, you go through them multiple times, up to 7 times, to help cement those patterns and tactics into your long-term memory, and you'll hopefully be able to remember them better and use them in your own games, not only for attacking but defense as well. So I had a viewer say that the last checkmate in 2 puzzles were too easy, and they were rated, I think, 1500 to 2500. And he said that most of them were like 1400 rated. I think the way these puzzles are done, I play the puzzles on chess.com, so it gives you a group of puzzles that I'm guessing, maybe you know out there, any of you viewers, where these puzzles come from. I think they're from actual games that are played on chess.com, and then it pulls those. And when the rating says, like today, I have the rating set from 2,000 up to 3,000. I think these checkmates in 2 came from games that were played by 2,000 to 3,000 rated players. Now, you have to remember, if you're solving checkmate in 2, you already know what the tactic is. So, if it's a 3,000 rated puzzle, it might have been a lot harder to set up the checkmate, and it might have taken 5 moves or something like that to set that checkmate up before it became a checkmate in 2. So you're armed with the extra knowledge of knowing that there's a mate in 2. If you're in a normal game and you don't know what the tactic is, or if there are any even tactics, it's much more difficult to find tactics in games when you don't know that there's an answer. But today, armed with that knowledge, hopefully even beginner players will be able to solve some of these 2,000 to 3,000 rated puzzles because they're only a mate in 2. So what do you do first? Well, you want to look at the move that your opponent just made, I guess, in a normal position, which is what? This rook moving here, preventing our pawn from pushing forward along with the bishop. But because these are mate and 2 problems, you can probably skip all the normal system of looking at the opponent's move, counting up the material, and go right to check moves, checks, captures, and threats, because those are the most forcing, especially the check first. Now, what checks do we have? We only have 2. So, if we go there, the bishop will just capture us. So that's not good at all. What's our other option? Or excuse me, I said we only have 2 checks, but we only have one check. But now what we have to do, since we don't have a good check, is to look at captures. Well, there's nothing that we can capture that's going to help us. So what about threats? Maybe we could threaten to check the king. So where could we move that would help us deliver a mate? Well, if we could go here, attacking the king with our rook, the king would just be trapped. So hopefully you found the answer, and we move here with the threat of mating here. Now, do they have a way to stop that? Remember, when you're about to check a king, they'll only be able to capture, block, or run from the attacker. So here, I don't think they can do any of that, because if we go here, what options do they have? Well, they can't capture our rook there. If we're getting ready to move it here, they have a dark squared bishop. That can't do anything, and the rook would not be able to swing over to defend in time. If they tried to move this pawn to try and run, well, we can still just take that pawn and deliver the mate. So hopefully you found this move. All right, there we go. That was rated 2040. On to puzzle number 2. Okay. Now remember, we know that it's a mate in two, so that helps us greatly knowing that. And we can take a quick look at what the opponent is doing. That way, if we can't check our king, or excuse me, if we can't check our opponent's king immediately and force him to respond, then we have to be aware of what our opponent can do. Because if we make some random move and then they check us, well, then we have to respond to that and we wouldn't be able to mate them in two. So we want to look at checks first as they are the most forcing. And maybe this is the same as the last puzzle. I think so. So all we got to do is swing our rook over to where we can place it here and deliver a mate again, just like in the last one. So we can't go here, or the bishop would capture us. So we have to swing over this way. And they don't have time to block us or run because the king is in a stalemated position and we can go there. So here and mate. All right. Well, hopefully you found that one, especially with the, after the first puzzle that was similar. On to puzzle number 3. Okay, we just gave a check to the king with our queen. The king ran. And how do we follow up here? Okay, we definitely want to look at those checks first. The bishop check is not so good looking because we can just capture. But if the queen checks here or here, which one is better? Well, we have to get a mate in two, so that means whatever our first move is, we have to follow up with a checkmate on the second move. So if we go here, I don't know, the king will be running more. Well, maybe that works as well. Maybe there's 2 ways to do this. Okay, nope, there's only one. I was thinking if we go here, if they block, well then maybe our bishop could deliver the mate as well. So maybe there is 2 ways. Oh no, because the queen can block, giving the king a way to run. So we have to go this way. Pause the video if you want to calculate this out more, as always. But if not, all right. And that's why, calculation is important. If you're trying to work on recognizing patterns, you generally want easier puzzles to focus on the patterns more. But because this is only a 2-move puzzle, all of these, it's not too much calculation. You have to do a little bit. But as I was saying, harder problems have you do more calculation, whereas easier puzzles you can focus just on pattern recognition. If you want a mix of both, well then you want to slowly start bumping up the difficulty level on the puzzles. All right, so if we go here, what can they do? Remember, when a king is being checked, the 3 options or less are capture the attacker, block the attacker, or run. So the king would have to do what here? Run. If we go there, he can't capture or block. He would have to run, and he could only go here or here. And either way, our king, or our queen, excuse me, will checkmate their king. All right, so check and mate. So good little pattern there. I hope you did well on that one. That was rated higher, 24-34. So on to puzzle number 4. The knight has what? Just dropped back, attacking our rook here. And we're behind in material. We need to find that checkmate. But how do we do it? All right, we look at the checks first. So at any time, pause the video if you just want to calculate on your own before I give away too many answers. Checks first. Well, if we go here with the rook, the king can what? Just run forward. And then it doesn't look like we have a good follow-up. I mean, we could maybe go here, but and attack the queen, pinning it to the king. But we're behind in material after that exchange. So I don't think that would work. So, and it's a mate in 2. So we definitely have to go for the mate. Sometimes you have to change the order in which you do things. If you're thinking about doing this first, well, maybe you do that last to deliver the mate. So what's another check? Well, hopefully you found the bishop that could move here, delivering check. And then the king can only go here, and then the rook delivers a back rank mate. So check. Now, if they blocked with the queen, well, then we can still go here anyway and deliver the back rank mate. All right, 24-12 was the rating. On to puzzle number 5. The knight has just captured our bishop. It's protected by their bishop, queen, well, and the king, so we can't get that back. And we're looking for checkmate in 2. So checks are very important, but what is the best way to check? And what checks do we even have? Well, we have the rook check here. We have a queen check here and here, and also here. But of course, as I said, we don't want to take that knight. All right. One thing about this check with the queen, it prevents the king from running back in the corner here and trying to run away. So if we check, the pawn prevents the king from coming forward, and the king can only go here or here. Oh, and then we're backed up by our own rook, and we can deliver the mate. So check, the king would have to run, and then we can deliver the mate. So here we go. And, another good little pattern of rook and queen working together. On average, it probably takes about 3 pieces to deliver a checkmate, but that really depends on how many defenders they have. If you have 3 attackers and they have 3 defenders, you're probably going to have a tough time breaking through. But if you have like 4 attackers and they only have 1 defender, you should definitely look at a way to break through for a checkmate if it seems possible. Or at least gain some material out of an attack. All right, on to puzzle number 6. We just had a capture here in front of our king. So instead of just recapturing, we probably want to look at how we can deliver a checkmate here in 2 moves. So what do we do first? Look at the checks. Okay, we have a bishop that can check, but it would just be captured. So the queen, you always want to look at the queen as it's such a powerful piece that can move all over the board. Definitely look at all the mates, all the checks, because even a move that doesn't look possible might be possible and help you deliver a checkmate. The normal moves first. If we check here, the rook is also covering the D file, so the king would have to move. But do we have a follow-up after that? I don't see a good follow-up. So, not for a mate in 2. If we go there, the rook is covering that. The king would have to move over. There's no way to get that queen or rook in there to deliver a mate. If you capture here, the king could just capture. So, what about that move? We'd be captured. And you want to look at moves that seem ridiculous at first, sometimes, because maybe that's a surprising move that actually works. Now, if we go there, I think they can just take us. So I don't know if that's any good. The other option is going here. The rook could capture, or the king would run. The bishop would capture. So if the bishop captured, now what? There's no good follow-up moves. So maybe I overlooked something. Once again, if we go there and the knight takes, no good follow-up. So maybe we have to go back Look at that move again. Did I overlook something? Queen. Queen checks. The king can only move here. Oh, okay, I did overlook something. The rook can still deliver the mate because the bishop is pinning this bishop to the king, and it would not be able to capture. So great little pattern there. We check, and because of that pin here, the bishop is not able to capture. All right, on to puzzle number 7. What do we have? The queen has just captured something here. Our turn to move. We're looking for those checks first. And okay, very instructive moment here. We have, when you're trying to check the king, what are the options? Once you check, they can capture, block, or run. But not always. Sometimes they have less than 3 options, especially when there is a double discovered check. That means we have this queen attacking the king. If this bishop moves, if it was a dark squared bishop, we would have a double discovered check. So I'm going to have to take that back. But we do have a discovered check. As I was saying, if this was a dark squared bishop and it could move and check the king at the same time, that would be a double discovered check. And when 2 pieces are checking the king at the same time, the only option is to run, because you can't block or capture 2 pieces at the same time that are both checking a king. All right, so I overlooked this. Since this is not a dark squared bishop, we still could move it, but if we do, what is the right way to do that? So maybe we have to set something up. All right, so this is definitely a little trickier than I expected. Rook is preventing the king from moving to the d file. Once we move the bishop, the queen will check. But there are 3 different ways to block. The queen won't be able to be captured. The king will not be able to run, so only blocking will work. Bishop could block, this bishop could block, or the queen could block. So we really need a good square for this bishop. Or do we, if we look at all the checks first, we definitely have to look at this check. If we do that, delivering the check, king would what? If he captured, I don't think we have a good follow-up after that. We could move our bishop, but they could just block that. So back to this discovered attack. Where do we move this bishop that could do any good? All right. I think we have to set up another checkmate. So pause the video if you need to think longer. If not, here we go. If we move here, we're also setting up a back rank mate by the rook and bishop working together. So they have to deal with that threat as well as the checking queen. So once we move here, they'll have to block with bishop or queen here or bishop here. Now the best move, well, the one that would prevent this would now allow the queen to capture. So take a look at this. Here we go. We're going to set up the rook back rank mate. They decide to block this way instead. So now we can just capture and have a back rank mate with the rook. If they would have blocked with their bishop, well, then our queen could have captured that bishop backed up also by our bishop. So there we go. All right, that was rated 2259. On to puzzle number 8, and maybe I'll have to bump these up even higher. That was a little trickier, but maybe in the future I'll have to try 2,500 or 3,000 and higher, because we already know that these are a checkmate in 2. So on to the final 3 problems. Puzzle number 8. They just captured, was that a queen that was a pawn that promoted to a queen perhaps up there? They capture, and now our mate in 2. All right. Well, the one thing we could do is, no, we can't even capture there, or they would just capture. And if we go here with check, the king could run into the corner. So I think we need to look at all the checks possible. Okay, the rook check doesn't work here or here. What about the queen checks? Well, the queen could go here. If we go here, we'll be captured. We could even go there. Oh, wow. Okay, maybe that's the move too. So hopefully you found that. If we go here, delivering a check, oh, well, that does work, because if the king attacks our rook, we don't want to take their rook or they would take ours. So instead, we can just move here and deliver a mate. So they'll probably move in the corner, but then we take the rook, delivering a back rank mate. So check and back rank mate. So that was a little tricky, where we moved our queen back before moving forward to attack. All right, on to puzzle number 9. Here we go. What do we have happening here? Okay, so as we know, these are mate in 2 problems. Generally you'd want to look at your opponent's move. What did that do? Is that pawn doing anything? Well, discovered attack now on the rook. But we are looking for a mate in 2, so we might as well skip counting up the material and looking at what our opponent just did, unless we can't check immediately. If we can check and force the king to respond, then we won't have to worry about their counterattacks. So how do we check? Well, the queen can capture this pawn and be recaptured. Do we have a follow-up after that? The rook could move over, delivering check, but the king could step to the side, or the bishop could even block. All right, so that queen move doesn't look too good. Can we go here, delivering check? The king would have to run here, and I don't see a good follow-up move. So maybe the queen move is not so good. The rook, we could go there, but the king would step forward, attacking our rook. And then, oh wow, okay. Then we could move up here with the queen attacking. So interesting pattern here. We check, then we move up here, and this is what I was talking about in past videos, and often I recommend this. If you can check the king from one of the 4 corners that are around the king, and you check the king with the queen, well, it's attacking through the center, and often it'll be attacking both sides. But here these pawns are preventing you from attacking the complete side, but the rook, which is now protected by the queen, handles that, and also handles the two opposite side squares here and here. So these two squares are the ones that the queen cannot cover. Usually, if these pawns weren't here, the queen would be able to cover everything else, but not these two opposite sides, and the rook handles that. All right, on to the final puzzle, the final chance at learning some new patterns here to help improve your game. What happened? The king just captured a piece here, I believe, but apparently he set himself up for a mate in two, so let's find it. All right, what can we do here? We're looking for checks first. If we check with the rook, well, then the king has a chance to escape back up the board. So maybe we want to leave that rook there covering that. And the pawn is covering these two areas beside the king. So and this pawn covers that. So the opposing king is in a stalemated position where it has no squares that it can move to. And if you ever see that, you definitely want to look at a way to checkmate the king, because he can't go anywhere. So if you could deliver a check, maybe it would be the winning check. Now, what checks do we have? And if it's going to take two moves to go after the king, does that even work? Well, probably not, because they have a check on the very next move, and then maybe a mate here backed up by the knight. So we need forcing moves that have check, but how best to do it? Now, often people really overlook pawn moves that can be very powerful. So when you're looking at your checks, don't forget the pawn moves as well. Now, if the knight goes here, it can be captured. If the knight goes here, it can be captured. So any other checks? Well, that's why I mentioned the pawn move, because if this pawn goes here, it delivers a check. But you have to remember the en passant move, which is what French for in passing. If you move forward here, attacking the king, they go here, capturing en passant, the same as if your pawn moved one square. So once that happens, we can just recapture with the knight and deliver the checkmate. So check and mate. So don't overlook those pawn moves, because sometimes there could be a winning pawn move that traps a piece or helps deliver a mate, or actually even the pawn itself could deliver mate sometimes. All right, as always, feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy hearing what viewers have to say. Give me your good opinions or bad opinions. Don't feel afraid to hurt my feelings. If you want to see something, definitely let me know, and I can try and work on that in future videos. Like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and have a super chess day.